Minister of State for Foreign Affairs.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, thank you for the opportunity to join this discussion. That we are discussing this issue as soon after the last debate on this very subject says much about the crises in Iraq. It speaks to the gravity of the current situation and to the reality of the struggle that many Iraqis are facing, and the so-called terrorist group ISIL continues to spread its flawed ideology across Iraq. It is that country's innocent civilians who stand in the crosshairs. They are targets, Mr. Speaker, unfairly victimized by a group whose only rule is to be ruthless, to destroy any and all who believe in the greater good, who want for an Iraq that is safe and self-sufficient, whose beliefs dare conflict with those of an extremist minority. We know, Mr. Speaker, that ISIL is waging a campaign of terror in Iraq, preying on the vulnerable to advance its alleged cause, doing so with wanton disregard for any and all who dare to stand in the way. This group is morally reprehensible, one that willfully kills innocent children, one that murders innocent journalists just to make a point, and that uses rape as a weapon of war. A group that savagely murders someone who is there to care for the innocent people caught in the middle of their twisted worldview. Mr. Speaker, today I pay tribute to the work of Alan Henning. Alan, a British aid worker, dedicated his life to helping those less fortunate. How any member of the human family would believe that Alan was a threat to their existence is beyond me and beyond comprehension. It further proves how sick and twisted this group has become. It is a group, Mr. Speaker, that must be contained to maintain peace and stability in the Middle East and to protect global security. Mr. Speaker, to lessen the incredible burden that has been so unfairly placed upon Iraqi civilians, they are the ones living on the front line in this conflict. The people whose lives have been torn upside down as ISIL has captured vast stretches of territory from the Syrian border in the northwest to the outskirts of Baghdad. I want to focus on that, Mr. Speaker, on the humanitarian aspect of this crisis and on the role that Canada is playing in helping Iraq's innocent children, its terrified mothers and fathers, to find the normalcy and the safety that they so desperately seek. Armed clashes between ISIL and government forces have driven displacement, causing the humanitarian situation in Iraq to rapidly deteriorate. Mr. Speaker, when such violence erupts, not only does it force masses of people to flee their homes and communities, it creates havoc. It creates havoc in the entire country. Businesses stop operating, people lose their jobs, food production and clean services get disrupted, and normal supply routes get blocked. Families get separated and suffer tremendous shock, especially when losing a parent, a child, a sibling, or a friend, and they are left to grieve amidst the turmoil of their own circumstances, which for many has included fleeing homes, villages, and the familiarity of everyday life. This has been the case for an estimated 1.7 million people. Mr. Speaker, 1.7 million people who have been displaced throughout Iraq. In early 2014, conflict displaced an estimated 475,000 people in Anbar province. And then in June, an estimated 571,000 people were displaced from Mosul. In August, an additional 662,000 were displaced from Sinjar area, where tens of thousands of Yazidi remained trapped for several days in dire humanitarian conditions and at temperatures of more than 40 degrees Celsius. And the size and pace of displacement has overwhelmed local communities, including in HoC Governorate, which is hosting more than 400,000 internally displaced persons. Following recent clashes between Kurdish Peshmerga and ISIL forces, there's also been reports of people being displaced for a second time from the Kurdish region of Iraq to the southern areas of the country. On August 12th, the United Nations declared the situation a level 3 emergency, the highest level for a humanitarian crisis, underlining the gravity of the situation. As a result, the humanitarian response in accessible areas is being rapidly scaled up, and humanitarian leadership is being bolstered. Approximately 43% of the internally displaced Iraqis are living in vulnerable locations, including schools, churches, mosques, and unfurnished buildings. And there is a concern that over 850,000 children are beginning to fall behind with their education because the schools being used as shelters have been unable to reopen as scheduled for the beginning of the school year in September. And Mr. Speaker, Canada is actively working with partners to address children's needs and to see what more can be done. We are currently working through experienced partners such as Save the Children, the United Nations High Commissioner for Refugees. These partners are helping to provide child-friendly environments for displaced children and giving them the psychosocial support that they need. We believe that when adults fight, children's education should not suffer, and that even in the face of conflict, a child's continued academic growth must be secured. Education can provide essential aid to Iraq right now. It gives children and youth a sense of normalcy, stability, and structure. When schools are open, places for children to free their minds of the anxiety of war and instead focus on the pursuit of knowledge and the betterment of skills. For most Canadians, the situation in Iraq is simply unimaginable. Few of us could ever contemplate having to leave our homes, leaving most of our possessions behind. Mr. Speaker, the thought alone is enough to spur our desire to help, because while we may not be able to relate to the chaos of war, we will understand on a basic human level that nobody should have to live that way. And that is why, Mr. Speaker, Canadians will say that the actions we've undertaken in response to the crises are a direct reflection of their own values and their understanding that a country like ours cannot possibly stand idle while millions of Iraqi civilians are suffering. Since the beginning of 2014, Canada has allocated nearly $29 million in humanitarian assistance to Iraq, and of this, $19 million is in response to the recent civil unrest, and almost $10 million is in response to the needs of the Syrian refugees in Iraq. This makes us one of the largest donors in response to this crisis. With these funds, lives have already been saved. Food and clean water are being provided to displaced people in need. Camps are being constructed through the United Nations High Commission for Refugees to provide for displaced with shelter. Measures are being taken to protect them from violence. And importantly, more health services and medical supplies are being made available to respond to the urgent needs of the displaced populations. The Canadian Red Cross also brought in relief supplies from Canada's warehouse in the International Humanitarian City in Dubai. These supplies, distributed by Save the Children and the United Nations High Commission for Refugees, are saving lives. Kitchen sets are helping hungry families to feed themselves. Tents are providing shelter and a place for the weary to get some rest. Hygiene kits, mosquito nets are preventing the spread of diseases. Through all these actions, the humanitarian front, Mr. Speaker, Canada is showing it stands by the people of Iraq. We will continue to look for more ways to respond to the needs of all Iraqis. But, Mr. Speaker, the world must unite to constrain the ISIL threat and ultimately to defeat it. Mr. Speaker, I would like to close in saying that it is important for the House to support our humanitarian and our work on to contain and to eradicate the ISIL threat. Thank you.